Hello and welcome to Track 1, Workshop 2, What are Related Services? My name is Lauren Klein and I am a member of the Family and Community Engagement team here with the Special Education Office at the New York City Department of Education. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we begin, I want to introduce our interpreters. Cesar, can you turn on your audio so we can hear you and you can share the Spanish interpretation line?
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es César y estoy trabajando con mi compañera Marina y Paula esta noche. Para todos ustedes que nos están acompañando en este espacio virtual esta noche, por favor les pido, si desean escuchar el audio en español, marquen al siguiente número de teléfono 347-966-4114 e ingrese el número de conferencia 148-478-58, numeral. Nuevamente, si usted nos está acompañando esta noche en este espacio virtual y desea utilizar la información en español, por favor, marque el número de teléfono 347-966-4114 e ingrese el siguiente número de reunión 148-478-58, numeral. Por favor, les pido que pongan en mudo sus teléfonos.
And now we have Ying, our Mandarin interpreter. She will share the conference line.
This is Mandarin announcement. 晚上好，收听中文翻译频道，请拨打347-966-4114，然后输入密码或者会议 ID 946-644-234，井号键。中文翻译频道，请拨打347-966-4114，然后输入密码或会议 ID 3946-644-234，井号键。如果您想听普通话翻译，但想待在这个会议虚拟室中，请便在电脑上看到会议，请将电脑调到静音，然后用电话拨打普通会议频道。再说一遍，中文翻译频道，请拨打347-966-4114，然后输入会议密码或者 ID 946-644-234，井号键。谢谢 ，Thank you.
I've also shared the Mandarin and Spanish conference lines in our chat so you can see them in front of you. Our interpreters will remind you on the calls to please mute yourself so you can hear only the interpreter and not other participants. Now, I'd like to introduce our facilitators for tonight. We have Kristen DeAndrea. She is the supervisor of Occupational Therapy. Welcome. We have Melanie Leong, who is the manager of speech services. Sujita Sippy, the physical therapy supervisor. And last but definitely not least, Suzanne Sanchez, the senior director of therapeutic services. So in other words, you are in excellent hands tonight. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please submit them through the Q&A. We will have time at the end of the presentation to answer some of those questions as a group. And if not, we'll definitely get to them privately in the chat. And with that, I turn it over to you, Related Services team.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren. And thank you to everybody who joined and is participating. We are so happy to be able to talk with you and share some information with you all today. Before I turn the presentation over to Sujita, I want to thank and acknowledge all the families and caregivers out there who have partnered with related service providers during the pandemic and as children start to transition and continue to transition back into their schools. One of the things that has become ever more clear during this time is despite the challenges, and of course there have been many, but working with families hand in hand in supporting children in receiving and benefiting from their related services has been a true bright spot. And we thank you all for your partnership. I'd like to turn the presentation now over to Sujita Sippy.
Thank you, Suzanne. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We hope we find the information presented today helpful in terms of adding to your knowledge base and understanding about school-based related services. We would like to start by going over our related services guiding philosophy. The fundamental objective of related services is to help maximize each student's ability to achieve his or her educational goals. Related services should always be delivered in the least restrictive environment and, when appropriate, pushed into the classroom. Next slide, please. So what are the different types of related services? So working with your school's team, you will develop an IEP with the CSE or CPSE office to determine which of any related services are appropriate for your child. Sample related services include assistive technology, counseling, hearing services, occupational therapy, mobility and orientation services, physical therapy, school nursing services, speech and language services, and vision services. Tonight, we will be focusing on occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech services, as well as assistive tech. So what are school-based related services? School-based related services are related services that assist a student with a disability in accessing the curriculum. What is the focus of therapy? So this triangle here it's super important. This is where we work. We focus on the student, the task, and in the environment. We mold these three things to ensure the student is as successful and as independent as possible in school. I'm going to give you a quick example of how speech, occupational therapist, and physical therapist works in these settings in order to increase a student's independence. So say a student is doing a read aloud in class and is having difficulty pronouncing certain vowel sounds or consonant sounds, and that is noted in the IEP. So a speech therapist would work one-on-one with the student during individual sessions to perfect and improve that issue in the classroom. So week after week after week, the student is better able to independently participate in that read aloud with their peers. So that's an example of how a speech therapist would do a direct intervention to improve the child's overall performance in the classroom. Father's Day is coming up. So say the children are working on a card for their dad. There's a lot of cutting, there's writing the message inside, there's working with manipulatives, there's cutting and pasting. That can be a lot for a child. If it is noted in the child's IEP that they have fine motor difficulties or graphomotor difficulties, an occupational therapist could work with the child in class and modify that task. They can put guidelines inside the card. They can put the little dashed lines so that the student is better able to cut and follow that tracing pattern. They could put an adaptation on the scissors so they're better able to hold the scissors. So by the occupational therapist now modifying that task, it has made the student more successful and better able to participate alongside their peers. Say a student is having difficulty washing their hands. A teacher is like, this student always needs help washing their hands. And a physical therapist is doing a consult and looking at the school environment. Well, maybe the student is just having difficulty accessing the fountain or accessing the sink. Maybe a simple environmental modification, such as adding a step stool, will now make the student more independent and participatory in that section of the school day. So I hope those illustrations just give you a quick kind of glance about how we as related service providers mold the student, the task, and the environment to make the student more independent and able in school. Next slide, please. So what are related service recommendations? How does this come about? So we would do a comprehensive evaluation and testing of the student and identify their strengths, weaknesses, and areas of improvement. All of that is noted on the student's IEP and the present levels of performance on the first page. So based on the PLOP, it's commonly referred to as the PLOP, you develop annual goals. These annual goals are specific, measurable, and achievable. Based on the PLOP and the annual goals, recommended program services are then added to the IEP. And to give you some examples of the types of services a few slides ago. The final step is coming up with the related service mandate. There are 5 key components to a related service mandate. The service type, what is being recommended, the frequency, how long is this service going to be? Is it going to be once a week, once a month, twice a week? What frequency best meets the needs of the student? The duration of the service, meaning how long is it going to last? 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes? What is the group size? Is it going to be an individual session or a group session? The clear benefits of group sessions include the peer socialization, the modeling, and the fact that the kids get to work with their friends. And the location of the service. Is it going to be performed in the classroom, which is ideal, or is perhaps a more restrictive setting that is quieter with fewer distractions warranted given the needs of the student? Next slide, please. So what are the benefits of integrated services? There are no negatives to integrated services as far as I'm concerned. Students, teachers, and providers all benefit from collaborative services. Providers share their expertise with the classroom teacher. Let's not forget where the student spends most of their day, in the classroom, not with the related service providers. So as much collaboration we do with the teachers, the better off that the students are, and vice versa. The teachers also share their expertise with the related service providers. Also their eyes. Say a student is fatiguing towards the end of the day when the related service provider is not in the classroom. By collaborating and letting the related service providers know that that is going on, we can now brainstorm in real time with the teacher and come up with these environmental modifications or task modifications that can help the student be more successful at all parts of the day, but at the end of the day in this particular example. Teachers and providers are on the same page regarding instructional planning. And the last point is the student is able to generalize all the things they're learning with related services into the classroom. That is what we want. At the end of the day, the related services are trying to make the child more independent. There's an inverse relationship between a student's performance and related services. The more independent and successful the child is becoming, the less and less they should need the related services. Next slide, please. So how is therapy delivered? So we, of course, have our in-person model, which is, of course, the student, teacher, related service provider all together in the same building. And we have remote related services, which have been a new addition the last year and a half, which is provided through video conferencing and audio via computer. Next slide. So assistive technology, we at the DOE are so fortunate to have a wonderful Center for Assistive Technology, otherwise known as CAT team, who have been bringing 21st century innovations to our kids at the DOE for many, many years. I'm in awe of the work that they are continually able to do. Assistive technology in particular are tools that help students who cannot otherwise access their curriculum when using only the supports and instructional technology currently in place. Assistive technology are IEP 504 driven, meaning these support services are listed as part of their IEP. Examples of what assistive technology can support include enabling students to communicate with classmates and teachers, completing their homework assignments, and participating in school programs and activities. So the assistive technology has 5 different websites where you can get more information. We really encourage you to visit this website and see all the different things that assistive technology may be able to do for your child, notably the NYC DOC Assistive Technology homepage and the AT family site. If you believe your student can benefit from an assistive technology evaluation, please prepare a letter with the appropriate information, and you can submit it to your child's school, their IEP team, the CSC, or the CPSC office to be referred to for an evaluation. And I'll hand it off to Kristen DeAndrea, who's going to go over more in depth the occupational therapy services at the DOE.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Sujita. Thank you so much. Yes, so we are going to talk now about occupational therapy specifically. And simply put, occupational therapy, or like we like to call OT, helps people do whatever they want or need to do. So OTs are concerned with one's ability to participate in desired daily life activities or occupations. And for children in the context of school, we would consider a child's role or an occupation to be a student, and the focus would be to help the student function well within their school environment. Therefore, school-based OT is designed to help a student with a disability maintain, improve, or restore function in all education-related activities. School-based OT may address challenges in the following areas. Classroom behaviors. So we look at things like, is a student able to maintain attention, follow directions and routines? Can the student interact appropriately with their peers and adults? Do they approach tasks in an organized way? Can they cope with frustration? Do they work independently? Do they show motivation? There's many things that go along with different classroom behaviors. And they're oftentimes influenced by a student's ability to self-regulate and or process sensory information received from the environment or even within their own bodies, which brings us to the next area commonly addressed by OT: sensory processing, self-regulation, and social emotional learning. Next, we have activities of daily living, looking at things like, can a student manage their clothing during arrival, dismissal, or when using the bathroom? Can they organize personal items in their desk, their backpack, their locker? OTs also look at the management of classroom tools and visual motor skills. Can a student coordinate their hands and fingers to hold a pencil or a crayon and to write legibly or draw in color? Can they use classroom tools efficiently, like a scissor, a ruler, or glue, to complete different classroom activities? Can they move their eyes easily for reading and copying from the board? And lastly, we like to look at movement or accessibility. Can a student move in a coordinated manner? Do they participate safely in different school environments? Do they keep pace with the class, say in the hallway? So again, we look at any underlying difficulties in these areas that may be impacting the student's overall school functioning. So now we're going to take a deeper look at occupational therapy and what it may look like across the grade levels. So starting with early childhood, pre-K and kindergarten. Early childhood provides the opportunity for learning through play and exploration. This is how our brains develop and grow. In early childhood, there's a focus on the development of motor skills as well as social skills and school readiness. And the emphasis is placed on setting a solid foundation and a positive school experience for future academic success in the years to come. So OT delivered in early childhood typically has a focus on the remediation of student skills. Services may be provided more intensely in early childhood based on the student's individual needs. Environment and task adaptations may be helpful to encourage student participation sooner as progress is made in individual skills. And consultation with teachers and families, this is very important to promote carryover of new skills and strategies being used across environments. So it's very important during these early ages to distinguish whether difficulties are stemming from limited exposure versus a true disability that requires intervention. For example, a young student may have difficulty cutting with scissors. This could be due to underlying visual motor difficulties, or it could be due to the fact that the student has just not had enough experience and practice and requires some of that for mastery of the skill. Okay, wanted to share with you some sample interventions used with our youngest learners during OT sessions. So the top row consists of things like shortened crayons and stickers on scissors to help facilitate a proper grasp on these classroom tools. Things like teaching belly breathing, as you can see with the little girl with the yellow shirt, and providing organizing sensory input with the use of different activities like a therapy ball can help with self-regulation and sensory processing. The bottom row includes a sample of an emotions chart, which can be helpful in promoting social emotional skills. Pre-writing and reading activities like letter recognition and formation is often provided in multi-sensory ways, like using Play-Doh, as you can see in the picture right there. And another example is using tiny manipulatives, like the activity of stringing beads to work on fine motor and visual motor skills. Now we're going to look at OT and how it may be delivered in elementary school. In elementary school, academic demands certainly increase, requiring more robust writing, copying, reading, and math activities. Focus is on the student's independence in the school environments with an understanding that it is less restrictive and best to treat when possible within the student's natural learning environment alongside their peers. For example, a session can be conducted in a classroom, on the playground, in the cafeteria, and even in small groups. So the focus continues to be on remediation of student skills, especially in the early elementary years, while considering adaptations of the environment and the task along the way to increase participation. Consultation with teachers and families, this remains a very important piece for carryover of skills and the strategies that they're learning during their sessions. Now, for older elementary students, student skill attainment at this point may slow down a bit and more emphasis is placed on adapting the environment and/or the task for greater independence and participation. For example, a student who struggles with writing, although during sessions they may still be working on fine motor and visual motor skills through targeted activities, the student may be offered to use adapted highlighted paper or possibly a slant board to improve that performance while in the classroom. And I'll show you an example of that in this next slide. Here are some sample interventions used with elementary students during OT sessions. So the first picture all the way to the left is highlighted paper. And this can be really helpful when used as a visual cue for the writing boundaries on a page. Also, I mentioned a slant board, and that young man in the blue shirt, he is writing on a slant board. It helps to position his hand, his wrist, his forearm in a more functional writing position. Different multi-sensory activities for visual motor tasks, such as writing in salt or sand, can be used. Also, a visual timer like this one you can see right here, that can be very helpful for a child to learn the concept of time and aid in transitions. Sometimes different programs are used to teach the student self-regulation and social emotional strategies to maintain that just right level for learning. And other things like adapted seating that you can see here, these little boys sitting on these therapy balls, sensory motor activities, and even sensory pathways, as you can see in this picture, they may be utilized to provide additional strategies for self-regulation and motor planning. Okay, now moving ahead to OT in middle school and high school. There is a higher demand placed on academics as the student prepares for their post-secondary goals, which may include high school, college, or pre-vocational and ADL programs. Generally, we hope to see less students requiring OT services in these upper grades as they transition out of elementary school, although some lingering challenges may still be present that require intervention. So when receiving OT, group activities are preferred to really maximize those social opportunities for the students within their natural school environments when possible. And common areas of intervention include a focus on executive functioning skills and self-determination skills. Although student remediation may still continue in some instances, the intervention focus area at this level is definitely centered more around adapting the environment and modifying the tasks in order to equip the student with strategies for independence during their school year and even beyond. For example, for a student who has continued difficulties maybe with writing legibly, it may be determined at this point that an assistive tech device like a laptop may be appropriate to improve performance instead of further remediation of any remaining underlying deficits. So now we're going to take a look at some sample interventions used with middle school, high school students during OT sessions. Like mentioned before, executive functioning is an area that is oftentimes addressed with the older student. Different strategies include using tools like a color-coded clock and the planner to work on time management, organization, and project planning. And technology like a laptop for completing assignments electronically. This is also sometimes introduced, but nowadays it seems to be more of a universal and necessary skill for sure. There can also be a focus on different life skills like travel training and money management skills, as well as empowering the student through self-advocacy and goal setting. So I hope you enjoyed this little overview of school-based OT. There's so much involved in these related services, but we hope to, again, give you just a bit of a glance to get you on the right start. So now I'm going to be passing the mic on to my colleague Sujita again, and we will be hearing more about school-based physical therapy.
Thanks, Kristen. So school-based physical therapy, what is it? Next slide, please. So school-based PT is physical therapy provided for students who need assistance accessing their educational environment. Luckily, the focus is in our name. We focus on the physical aspects of these settings. This may include addressing mobility limitations, balance, coordination, or any strength issues affecting participation. In this picture on the left, this is an actual playground attached to DOE public school. So in the example I'm about to give, the educational environment environment would be the playground. That is a huge piece of an elementary school and preschool age child's school day. You can see there's this blue balance board type thing in the forefront of the picture. And in the back, I don't know if you can make it out, there are some stepping stones about 2 feet off the ground, spaced about 1 foot apart. And there's a pole in the middle of all those stepping stones for the children to hold onto and to jump, hop, step from stone to stone. So if your child gets school-based physical therapy or is considering getting school-based physical therapy via an evaluation, we would take your child out to this actual setting and see how they're doing. How are they performing? Are they able to access this equipment? Are they able to jump down safely? Are all the right muscles responding in the proper way? And is it better than their peers? Is it less than their peers? Is it about the same as their peers? So we look and see the child's physical function in comparison to their peers. If there are any physical issues there, then school-based PT could potentially intervene and work with the child to improve their participation in this particular area. Next slide, please. So the other places where you will commonly see school-based physical therapists practicing include the classroom, school transitions and school mobility, the cafeteria or mealtime, and toileting. So in the classroom, a few of the things we look at: can the child sit at the rug with their peers? Can they transition back to their desk? Can they maneuver around the periphery of the classroom safely? Can they reach down off that bookshelf and get a pretty heavy book off the shelf and bring it back to their desk safely? Those all involve teeny tiny physical tasks that we look at and analyze to make sure that the student is performing at the level of their peers. I gave you a playground example, but another playground example, say there are about 8 different climbing apparatuses on the playground. Can your child access all 8? Can they only access 2 or 3? You know, why is that? Is it a visual issue or is it a physical issue? Is accessing 2 or 3 developmentally appropriate? Maybe so for a pre-K or a small little 3 or 4-year-old, but is that developmentally appropriate for a 7 to 10-year-old? So we start looking at that and teasing out where school-based PT might be able to assist. Transitions in school mobility. If you do a school tour, I'm convinced at some point you will see a physical therapist working in the stairwell with the student. Are they able to do those stairs safely and effectively? Can they keep up with their peers? Are they falling behind by a step or 2 or by a flight or 2? A flight or 2 would obviously be concerning because now they're arriving to that next period, whether it be social studies or art, maybe 5-10 minutes late. If they're missing 5-10 minutes of academic instruction time because a physical issue is preventing them from arriving to that period on time, that's a concern. We want the child accessing their educational curriculum as much as possible. Mealtime. Mealtime has a lot of things going on. There is auditory stimuli, there is visual stimuli, there's things on the floor. The children have to walk up to the front of the line, retrieve their tray, balance, there's fruit on there, there's milk on there, there's water on there, you know, make it back to the bench safely and been able to maneuver their body back on the bench and eat with their peers. So there's a lot of intrinsic movements involved there. And that is an area we look to make sure that the students are functioning to the best of their ability. If they are not, that obviously affects their ability to eat. We don't want that. We want our children doing what they should be doing during that setting. So that's just an example of some of the things we as school-based therapists look at in that setting. Toileting. So say your student uses an assistive device. They use a reverse rolling walker, or they're using loft-strand crutches. Well, if they're busy using their hands to support themselves and they're walking, do they have enough strength? Do they have enough balance in their lower extremities to shift their hands from that assistive device and wash their hands? Yes or no? And if they don't, we certainly don't want them not participating in that aspect of the school day. So we look to give strategies and suggestions, strengthening exercises, teach them how to balance themselves against the pedestal of the sink in order so that they can properly participate in that aspect of the school day. Next slide, please. So This is a little bit similar to what Kristen had mentioned for occupational therapy, but there's differences between physical therapy in early childhood, elementary school, and later on in the middle school and high school. In early childhood, it is very play-based, play-focused. They're interacting with their friends there, and we're just trying to motivate them, strengthen their little bodies up for the demands that are going to be eventually coming in elementary school and kindergarten. So we do bubbles, bean bags, balls, colorful lights and sounds, things that really the children enjoy working with, and the focus is heavily one-to-one on that child. That's not to say we don't modify the environment or the task, we certainly still do, but the focus is very heavily on the student. So the examples of some of the environmental and task modifications are pictured on the right, the step stool I had mentioned earlier in this presentation. But in the top right, you'll see kids sitting together at circle time. The little girl in the pink and white is doing a long sit. The little boy to her left is doing a tall kneel. You'll see a child in the back who's sitting in a lap of perhaps a paraprofessional. So there's no one size fits all. If your child doesn't have the hip, extensor, external rotation, if they're not able to sit comfortably crisscross applesauce, quote unquote, that is fine. We want the child all together participating, whatever modifications need to be made so that everyone is included and participating is our goal. Next slide, please. So elementary school. Elementary school is just such a fun opportunity to still do those remedial skills. We're still working one-on-one with the student, but we're also looking at the environment and the tasks. So in the picture on the middle, you can see the students using a standing desk as opposed to sitting. So we can certainly change positions to accommodate the needs of the child. And the big thing that starts occurring more in elementary school, as Kristen mentioned, is grouping. Putting the children with their friends, with their peers, doing that peer modeling so they can learn from each other. It's just such a wonderful thing for kids to be with kids and improve together. I'll never forget, I worked with one little boy, his partner was traveling abroad for a month. And for a month, every session, he looked at me with despair when his partner was not there. He did not want to work with just me. I was only slightly offended. But to me, like, his face really drove home the point that the children want to be with each other. So when we get to that phase of the IEP meeting and you hear that we're looking to graduate your student to a lesser restrictive setting, to group them with their peers, that's really something to be celebrated and embraced. It's such a unique opportunity and the students so look forward to it. Next slide, please. So once we get to middle school and high school, this is very similar to what Kristen outlined. It's much less student-centered interventions and much more environmental and task modifications. The rationale being, we've worked on the walking, we've worked on the running, we've worked on as much of the physicality as we can. At some point, when do we say we need to prepare for life? School is ending, life is beginning. So we need to make sure that the student's self-advocacy skills are there. Can the student ask the person sitting next to them, hey, you're going up to pick up the packet of homework, would you mind grabbing mine as well? So they could conserve their physical energy and use that energy towards their academics, which, remember, is what we are here for. We're very proud at the DOE. We have a student attending Columbia University in the fall. He's a wheelchair-bound student who is nonverbal. His school-based physical therapy the last few years is 100% exclusively focused on task and environmental modifications that make him successful and conserve his physical energy so that he has his academic wherewithal to pursue higher education and his dreams. So it's still physical therapy. It's just looking at things more globally in terms of what benefits the students after graduation. Another point I'd like to make with middle school and high school is job training, particularly Typically in our District 75 sites, it is very common to see school-based physical therapists push into work-study sites and job training sites. So we'll actually go to those sites and look at the new demands of the environment. It's not necessarily the classroom, but it's an actual job placement. Can they carry the things they need to carry? Can they transfer, the boxes or whatever needs to be done? Do they need ergonomic training, lifting technique training? So we certainly can intervene upon that in school-based physical therapy. The last point I want to make about physical therapy at this stage of the game, a child may have gotten physical therapy in pre-K and early elementary and maybe no longer needed it for a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grades. And then maybe during the job training in high school, we may need to revisit the need for physical therapy. That is absolutely okay. We have episodes of care. We do not need to have the same level of episode of care pre-K through 12th grade. If we do, in my opinion, I think we're doing something wrong. It should go up, it should go down as the student is getting more and more independent. But if we need to revisit that later on, we absolutely can if the environmental and physical needs have changed. Next slide, please. So the last thing I'd like to leave you with is just some physical activity suggestions for all kids. Carrying groceries, picking up toys, washing dishes, washing the car, raking the leaves, carrying out the trash, making your bed. Whole host of activities. I think something that gets a little lost on all of us, even me sometimes being a physical therapist, PT starts the second you get out of bed in the morning and put your feet on the ground. Your physical training for the day starts. Our physical training for all of our kids starts right in that moment. So embedding practice into their after school and weekend is such a huge, huge component of their success. Allow them opportunities to practice, allow them to pick up their own toys. That's a good amount of squatting we as parents do, picking up all our kids' toys. Imagine they're the ones doing that squatting, how much extra practice they're getting built within their home day, not just their school day. So this concept of embedded practice is something I request of all of you on this call to encourage with our children so that they are better able to meet their school goals and goals that you have for them as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Melanie, who's going to discuss more of the speech therapist services at the DOE.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm going to be talking about what school-based speech therapy is and what it looks like. School-based speech therapy helps students develop their listening, speaking, and communication skills with the goal of accessing school material. These services are provided for students with disabilities who have impairments in the areas of speech and language development that prevent them from understanding language, expressing themselves, and working with others. Speech and language services may be provided in individual or small group sessions, in a separate room, or in classrooms when teaming with teachers. Speech teachers can work together with classroom teachers, parents, and other school staff to make sure their work is relevant to what they are learning and can be transferred to other environments. In schools, speech and language therapy supports communication and focuses on different areas so that the student can access their classroom content. Articulation, phonology, and fluency. This is the area that usually first comes to mind when people think of speech therapy. It is related to a student learning how to form clear and precise sounds within their speech and produce fluent, connected speech. Receptive language is the ability to understand words and language. For example, the ability to comprehend directions, understand questions, and as the student matures, the ability to understand complex texts and concepts and their relationships. Expressive language is how the student communicates their wants and needs. For instance, the ability to verbally comment on an object or relay a message. And as they mature, it will target their ability to express more complex concepts in more complex ways, such as writing and participating in debates. Literacy is the ability to read and write and can fall under the umbrella of receptive and expressive language. In preschool, it relates to the development of pre-literacy skills. For instance, attending to a story, learning how to turn the pages of a book, learning about characters in a story. And as the student develops it progresses into rhyming words, learning letter sounds, combining those sounds into words, and then eventually reading and writing. Pragmatic language refers to the social language skills that we use in our daily interactions with others. The ability to use language for a variety of purposes, fix misunderstandings, adapt to the needs of communication partners, and the ability to follow the unspoken rules. Speech therapy that focuses on using clear speech. It is important to note that for young children, unclear speech can be developmental. As the muscles that make sounds get stronger, their speech may become more clear. For students who have goals relating to using clear speech, speech therapy can focus on understanding the differences between sounds, understanding how sounds are made, and building awareness that different sounds can change meaning. For instance, a child who leaves off the last sounds in words may be saying bow, but really means to be saying boat. Your child's speech teacher may target their clear speech at the same time as addressing other areas of need. They may choose books and materials that contain a student's target sounds. This gives them the opportunity to practice their sounds while also working on any receptive language, expressive language, or social communication goals that they may be working on. Early childhood students are building their understanding or receptive language by exploring their environment. Speech therapy can help students with disabilities by helping them make connections between concepts. They can target following directions. This can be done by building understanding of basic concepts, such as explicitly reviewing and teaching concepts like in, out, off, on, over, under, before, after, first, and then. They can also help build connections between words by teaching them word relationships. For example, top and bottom are opposites, or circle, square, and triangle are all shapes. Speech teachers can build print recognition, so they can work on recognizing letters, recognizing their names, common words in the environments, as well as following routines, which is building understanding of the student's role in the school, the flow of the day, and understanding how and when to move from task to task. As students mature, therapy continues to build on these concepts. So in elementary school, a speech teacher may target following directions of increasing length and complexity. They can also support students with their learning about books and book structures by teaching them that books are read from left to right, that the cover is on the outside, the title, about the table of contents, and the glossary. They can build this child's understanding of stories by explicitly teaching them about parts of the story. For example, character, who is the story about? Setting, where did it take place? Problem, why are they telling the story? And solution, how did the story end? As students progress in school, they shift from learning to read to reading to learn. There is more of a focus on building understanding of nonfiction texts and sources. Students will interact with text to learn science, math, history, and other subjects. Speech therapy can help students access and engage with this material by continuing to teach students how to understand new vocabulary. A common strategy is using prefixes, such as anti for against, like in the word antifreeze, or suffixes, such as age for result in the word wreckage. By learning common prefixes and suffixes, students can break down unfamiliar words to get a sense of their meaning. Therapy can also focus on guiding students to use context clues to understand difficult words. For example, sometimes a hard word is introduced in text, but then is said in a simple way later on. An instance of this is, Lou was sent to the haberdashery to buy a new suit. The word haberdashery is unfamiliar, but because the sentence says that Lou would find a new suit there, we can infer that this word must mean it's the place where you can buy suits. They will continue to learn about story components and how to break down sentence structure so that they can draw meaning and understanding of the material that they are exposed to in any subject. Students may also prepare for state exams and regents by learning how to identify or break down the questions so that they can prioritize their reading of the content to highlight the information that they are looking for. For instance, if they're asked the question, who is the story about? The student will know to read the content and focus on a person or a character. To target an early childhood student's expressive language, a speech teacher may work on encouraging the students to use longer sentences to communicate. They will guide the students to include more detail in their sentences. I want the big red puzzle piece versus I want the puzzle. They can support the development of storytelling, or they can work on sound letter correspondence through playing sound identification games, what animal says moo, what letter makes a sound, or ask them make the sound the letter P makes by playing rhyming games, like rhyming the words like cat and hat or house and mouse, playing word games such as saying words that start or end with certain sounds. Building all of these skills will set the foundation for reading. They can also work on answering questions about books read aloud. For instance, reading a book and asking, how do you think the character feels? As the students mature, therapy will continue to build on these concepts, and therapy can focus on both written and spoken expression. When targeting written expression, students may use graphic organizers like shown on the middle of the slide, or visual outlines to organize their writing. In middle and high school, students may be engaging in discussions, debates, presentations, and they will need to use multiple sources such as fiction and nonfiction texts, as well as their own experiences to support their opinions and points of view. They will combine their knowledge with new ideas in an organized manner to convey their thoughts both verbally and in writing. They will also focus on building life skills. For instance, a speech therapist might be working with them to hone their interview skills or work on their resume, such that they can be effective communicators beyond the school setting. For early childhood and elementary school students, speech therapists can support developing play skills. For example, taking on different roles in play. A child can pretend to be a mother, a father, a doctor, or a teacher, supporting skills needed to play and eventually work with their peers collaboratively, for instance, turn taking or compromise. They will also work with students to understand school routines, such as raising hands and understanding the social rules for different school environments. As students go through school, the speech teacher can also support students with their understanding of how and when to make wants known. For instance, saying please and thank you, not interrupting, and adhering to guidelines about the shifting communication styles based on the school environment. They may be expected to raise the hand in the classroom to request for something, but they might not necessarily have to do it when they're speaking with their peers in the cafeteria. They will also engage in extended conversations with adults and peers and work on maintaining topic of conversation. They can also help with repairing communication breakdowns, like how to clarify misunderstandings and understanding the point of view of others. For instance, when a student is telling a story, they need to provide enough information so that people who did not experience the event can understand what happened. In middle and high school, social interactions can become more nuanced, and speech teachers can help students understand that communication rules can change in different environments. They can also teach students the skills needed to observe the environment and adjust their language and communication to meet the needs of the different listeners and situations. For instance, they will have a different communication style when speaking with a younger child versus speaking with an adult, or when they're engaging in an interview versus a casual conversation. Overall, speech therapy can teach students with language impairments the rules of language and strategies to break it down so that they can move towards independence. This way, as they're exposed to increasingly complex language, text, and social situations, they will have the skills and strategies to understand it and be effective communicators. The next slide contains educational resources that include some OT, PT, and speech activities. One site is GoNoodle, and we can click through to GoNoodle. This website provides fun family movement activities and mindfulness activities. They provide activities for children and also can be used by adults that are a short burst of physical exercise to keep them grounded, focused, and motivated through the day. So there are different videos here. Actually, I was clicking through this earlier. There are different games. There are resources in different languages as well. So this is definitely a nice site that targets OT activities, PT activities, as well as language activities. And then it is important to note that families are a key part of a child's support group. An active family collaboration is encouraged and necessary to ensure the carryover of skills and strategies learned across environments. So get to know your child's related service providers or your school's team and ask questions. The therapist or your school's team can provide strategies or resources based on your child's specific needs and home environment impacting school-based function. Thank you so much for participating. I think we might have some time left over for a brief period of Q&A, and families can always email questions to specialeducation@schools.nyc.gov.
So unfortunately, we are just at 5:50, which means we must come to a close and give you your very necessary 10-minute break before our next sessions. We received a ton of excellent questions, many of which we were able to answer privately. But if for some reason we didn't get to you, we of course encourage you to first speak to the team at your school. And if you need additional support, to email specialeducation@schools.nyc.gov. If you're staying with us for track 1, workshop 3, the continuum of special education services, no need to move. Otherwise, you can go view one of the other tracks and final 2 workshops. Thank you very much.